It's the scoop of the century. An old university friend of Keir Starmer lifted the lid on the Labour leader's criminal past, revealing that he had been caught by French coppers illegally selling ice creams on a Mediterranean beach. Speaking to Politico's Westminster Insider podcast, John Murray spilled les haricots, terrible pronunciation, so sorry, about a holiday that they had taken as students in the 1980s. We spent a month as almost beach bums, selling ice creams to tourists and making about 4 francs a day, Murray told the podcast. The place was overrun with other beach sellers because they'd all been suckered into thinking they'd earn hundreds of pounds a day. And then we found out it was actually not legal. So we spent our time kind of avoiding being arrested. To be honest, I did get arrested, but all that happened was you had your ice creams confiscated, got a receipt, and then had to walk back to the beach without your flip flops. When pressed by journalists, a Labour spokesperson said, "We are happy to make clear that no arrests were made or even names taken, and that the only loss of liberty occurred to some cut price ice creams." Now, this is the kind of thing that is harmless and mischievous, and it makes for an interesting tidbit about politicians. It humanises them, it makes them seem a bit less stuck up and a lot more normal. And everyone has a bit of a laugh. A Labour spokesperson gets to issue a cheeky comment, and everyone goes home happy. It's not exactly the stuff of true crime podcasts. But that wasn't the view taken by Keir Starmer as Director of Public Prosecutions when a man was sentenced to over a year in prison for stealing an ice cream during the 2011 riots. Anderson Fernandez walked into a dessert shop after finding the door open. He took 2 scoops but did not like the coffee flavour, and he gave it to a passing woman. After serving his sentence, he was threatened with deportation to Portugal, a country he hadn't been to since he was a young child, and he faced a ban from the UK of 10 years. As Director of Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer could have made the decision that it wouldn't be in the public interest to prosecute someone for such a low level offence. After all, he himself had been involved with some unlawful gelato as a young man. But instead, Starmer took a very aggressive line in prosecuting offences committed during the riots. The pressure for tough justice meant some first time offenders were imprisoned for the pettiest of crimes, including stealing bottles of Evian and multi packs of crisps. Nicholas Robinson, a 23-year-old electrical engineering student with no previous convictions, was sentenced to 6 months for stealing £3.50 worth of water from Lidl in Brixton. A sixth form student got 10 months for looting 2 left-footed trainers in Wolverhampton. Some of the rioters' sentences were 4 times as long as those of people who committed equivalent offences in 2010. Half the rioters who appeared before the courts were under the age of 20, and just over a quarter were technically children. So, Mike, how do you think Keir Starmer, the Director of Public Prosecutions, might have looked at Keir Starmer, the ice cream selling student?
Well, he would have been locked away and the key would have been thrown away while he was at it. I think we have to remember that Starmer took a very punitive approach following the London riots as Director of Public Prosecutions. And when we had all night courts to prosecute people for these really petty crimes. And I think Starmer has taken this really tough law and order approach. I mean, earlier this year, he was speaking about how thugs are running rampant on our streets and creating a moral panic about crime. And again, I'm not suggesting crime isn't an issue in this country. Of course it is. But I think for someone who in his past was slightly mischievous, it's funny that he's adopted kind of tough law and order stance that kind of seems to exaggerate the nature of crime in this country. So I think Starmer wouldn't have looked very kindly on a young Starmer and his mischievous behaviour when it comes to gelato. And I think it's just all a bit silly, really. I don't think we need to create these moral panics about crime. And I think, yes, people should face some consequences for stuff they do, but some of these harsh sentences that he awarded as he was kind of oversaw Director of Public Prosecutions, were over the top.
I mean, I think this also reflects this really deep hypocrisy in what we want from politicians. So Keir Starmer keeps being asked, "Did you try drugs at uni?" And he'll respond in this kind of mischievous way, "I had a good time." And then I don't know if you remember this from the Tory leadership race back in the day, everyone was falling over themselves to talk about how they'd done drugs. So you had Rory Stewart saying that he'd tried opium, you've got someone else saying that he'd had a bang lassie once, and then you had Andrea Leadsom saying she'd smoked to join. And that's the one that I didn't believe. I was like, no, you fucking didn't. You never have in your entire life. And it's this idea that we want politicians to have lived a life and done some stuff which is illegal or considered antisocial, and it shows that they're human like the rest of us. But then when the rest of us do it, we want sentencing, we want being locked up, throw away the key, we want ankle tags, we want ASBOs, we want monitoring. I mean, do you think that the journalists asking these kinds of questions are aware of the hypocrisy, or does it just not really cross their minds?
I don't think it crosses their minds, and it's it is really funny that it's one rule for them, one rule for us. So, like, a politician can boast about how they smoked weed and took drugs when they were at university, but if a member of the public does that, it's like, look, I got you. Look, you're a delinquent. You're this, you're that. You're labeled as this kind of criminal. But when they do it, it's like, I was having fun. I was having a good time. I was at Cambridge smoking some joints, as you do at Cambridge. So I do think this kind of hypocrisy in the political class is really grating on the public. And again, it leads to this real division between us and them, because members of the public are like, well, actually, you guys can boast about it, but when members of the public are seen doing it, you want to throw the key away and lock them in prison forever. So I think the political class and the journalistic class need to kind of look within themselves and stop being hypocrites, essentially.
What I've always wanted to do when I'm on a panel, like for Question Time or Politics Live, and there's a drug story, is be like, put your hand up if you've tried drugs. It's never yet come up, but I'm going to do it one of these days. Just you watch.